The sun was just beginning to rise over the quiet countryside of Greenwood County, Mississippi, as Elijah King stood on his porch sipping coffee. The old wood beneath his boots creaked faintly, and the mist from the fields curled like smoke around the oak trees that lined his 40-acre property. A man of few words and quiet strength, Elijah had carved a peaceful life for himself since retiring from the Marines 15 years ago. His land, handed down from his grandfather, was his pride. It wasn't just a farm, it was a legacy. He raised cattle, goats, and a few horses, all of whom he cared for with the same discipline he once gave to military operations. But peace in rural towns is often paper thin, and recently it had been fraying. A local gang known as the Vultures had been spreading their reach, intimidating landowners, stealing livestock, and damaging property. Elijah had heard the stories, of course, but kept to himself, trusting in the fence lines, his dogs, and his quiet reputation to keep trouble away. He hadn't realized how much that would be tested. One morning, Elijah noticed something was wrong. The usual morning calls from his goats were silent. He walked down to the pen, coffee still in hand, only to drop the mug in shock. Several goats lay motionless, their throats slit. The gate had been torn off its hinges, and spray paint marked the barn wall. Move or else. His heart sank. These weren't just animals, they were his livelihood, his companions, his peace. He buried the goats himself that day, anger simmering behind the stern set of his jaw. The sheriff's deputy who came out later, a young man named Carson, looked nervous. "It's probably the Vultures," he said, shifting from foot to foot. "They've been pressuring folks around here to sell land. You've got good grazing space. They want it." Elijah just nodded. "So, what's the plan?" Carson shrugged helplessly. "We've been keeping an eye, but they operate at night. Hard to catch. If you had security cameras—" "I don't need cameras," Elijah said, quietly. "I've got a memory, and I've got time." That night, Elijah didn't sleep. Instead, he retrieved a locked case from beneath his bed. Inside were the tools of a life most of Greenwood County didn't know he'd lived: medals, badges, and a well-maintained M4 rifle. Elijah King had served 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan, and led countless black ops missions no one would ever hear about. His name carried weight in certain circles. Ghost King, they called him in the Marines. He wasn't just respected. He was feared. He spent the next few days reinforcing his property, not with walls, but with strategy. He set motion sensors in the woods, reprogrammed his old military-grade drones to patrol at night, and placed trip alarms in likely entry points. But more than that, he waited, like a predator, like the Marine he once was. It didn't take long. 3 nights later, just after 2 a.m., the tripwire by the west pasture snapped. Elijah, already dressed and alert, slipped out through the side door, night vision goggles on, rifle slung over his shoulder. He moved through the shadows with the grace of a man who'd once hunted insurgents in the deserts of Fallujah. He spotted them near the barn, 4 young men, all in black hoodies, armed with bats and knives. They were laughing, ignorant of the silent storm coming their way. Elijah moved quickly, silently. In seconds, he disarmed the first boy with a swift arm lock and brought him to the ground. The second turned in time to catch a stun baton to the ribs, dropping like a sack of bricks. The third tried to run, but was tripped by a wire Elijah had placed near the gate. The fourth, the only one who'd managed to swing, found his bat caught midair and was met with a hard punch that shattered his nose. The fight was over in under a minute. Elijah didn't call the police right away. Instead, he sat the boys on the ground and waited until they sobered up from their adrenaline. "You came here to scare me," Elijah said, voice cold and low. "But you didn't ask who I was. You didn't ask what I've done." One of them, the ringleader, spit blood and sneered. "Old man, we ain't scared of you." Elijah stepped closer, crouched in front of him. "You will be." Then he pulled out his old military ID, placing it in front of the young man's face. "Google that name. Do it. Then tell your crew to leave this town before I stop playing nice." When the sheriff arrived 20 minutes later, he found 4 gang members tied neatly with zip ties, weapons stacked on the ground, and Elijah sipping coffee like nothing had happened. "They'll talk," Elijah said simply, "And if they don't, I've got the footage." Sheriff Hill, a longtime friend, just shook his head. "You always knew how to send a message, Eli." The arrest of the gang members led to more than just jail time. With the gang's faces plastered all over local news, residents came forward, emboldened by Elijah's stand. One by one, families that had been too afraid to speak out filed charges, gave statements, and helped the county crack down on the gang's operations. Within weeks, the vultures were dismantled. Elijah never spoke much about what had happened that night. When neighbors asked, he just said he handled it. But word spread, and with it, a deep new respect. No one looked at the quiet black farmer the same way again, not just as a man who grew crops and raised animals, but as a warrior who defended his land with the same honor he'd once defended his country. A few weeks after the incident, a group of local teens knocked on Elijah's door. They offered to help rebuild his goat pen and barn wall. One boy, no older than 16, looked up and asked, "Mr. King, were you really a Marine?" Elijah gave a rare smile. "Still am," he said. "Once a Marine, always a Marine." And as the sun set on Greenwood County that evening, it cast its golden light over a farm that was more than just land. It was a fortress of legacy, honor, and unshakable resolve.